Harry managed not to shout out, but it was a close thing. The little creature on the bed had large, bat-like ears and bulging green eyes the size of tennis balls. Harry knew instantly that this was what had been watching him out of the garden hedge that morning.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Belated Binge Podcast. I'm Zach, your host, revisiting some of the most iconic series in recent memory that I was incredibly late on, like our current binge of Harry Potter, where despite being the same age as movie Harry, I didn't read this series through until my mid-20s. That's the belated part. Now we're going back a chapter or two at a time, picking it apart, deep diving what's on the page, speculating about what isn't, particularly Dumbledore's role and his master plan. What did he know? When did he know it? And the motivations guiding the story. And, of course, infusing as much sarcasm as I possibly can. That's the binge part. Together, they make the belated binge, and today we continue our reread of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets with Chapter 2, Dobby's Warning. Before we get into it, this podcast will have spoilers. If you haven't read these by now, you're even later than I was. This podcast could also have adult language. Scratch that. It will have adult language. You can buy these in the kids section at the bookstore, but I didn't read them until I was a grown-ass man. In case you were obliviated or you got your Hogwarts letter late, last episode, nothing happened. That's not an exaggeration. It was a chapter full of reminding us what happened in the first book and reminding us how shitty the Dursleys are as people and how bad Harry's life is away from Hogwarts. It's called the worst birthday, and he was supposed to spend it in his room pretending not to exist while the Dursleys kissed the ass of some couple that was coming for dinner because Vernon thought it'd be the biggest drill sale of his career. They abused Harry verbally, emotionally, and if Petunia's aim didn't suck as bad as her personality, they would have abused him physically. Before we can move on from that just wonderful sounding chapter to get into this week's, we need to close the book on what happened in our last episode and recap our
Expecto Plot Changeo.
This is the part of the show where we theorize on what we would expect to change in our story if we had made one small change to the plot of the chapter that we're covering. In Chapter 1 of Chamber of Secrets, The Worst Birthday, I asked, what if Petunia Dursley had better aim with that soapy frying pan? So what if the soapy frying pan actually connected? What if the Dursleys, what would they even do if that would have happened? Would they take him to the hospital if necessary? Would they just leave him lay on the ground, knocked out in the garden? Would something else happen entirely? What do you think? Amy responded on Facebook. So for me, this one is layered. One, I don't think she would have made contact. Since Harry is magical and can do some magic with his mind, I think that would have prevented it from making contact. 2, I don't know if she actually meant to hit him or just sort of threw it as a warning, to be honest. And 3, if I'm wrong on the first 2 and it did happen to make contact, I don't think they would do anything. He'd probably lay there until he came to or was helped by Mrs. Fig. All fair points. So from my perspective, I don't think the Dursleys would have even taken Harry to the hospital, even if he needed it, especially if it was because Petunia KO'd him with a frying pan. But in the last chapter, I don't think it would have gotten that far. At that moment of the story, we know that Dobby was hiding in the bushes. I think he would have probably, magically stopped the pan from smashing Harry's skull. Perhaps her aim was actually good, and that's exactly what he did. If Dobby can defend Harry from a potential killing curse from an overdramatic Lucius Malfoy movie scene, that's not how it actually happens in the book, by the way. I'm being facetious. But if he can do that, he can stop a frying pan. But I suppose if that was the case, the letter about the underage magic would have come even sooner. Either way, Harry manages to escape the chapter without a concussion, and I think that would have been the case regardless of Petunia's aim. So, that thankfully wraps up our chat from last episode's chapter, The Worst Birthday, also known as the worst chapter, literally, probably, in this entire series. Maybe. I'm not really sure. Anyways, let's get into this week's Expecto Plot Changeo question. As I get my phone out, flip it around selfie style for the social medias, and here we go. This week's Expecto Plot Changeo question from Chapter 2 of Chamber of Secrets, Dobby's Warning, is: what if Harry just lied to Dobby and said he wouldn't go back to Hogwarts? Would the elf have left him alone? Would Harry have gotten a letter about underage magic at all? Would Dobby have kept tabs and still taken his future actions? Would worse have happened? Would Vernon have made the sale and somehow, became rich? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts, and they'll be included in the next episode. There it is. This little video I just made will be posted on social media across Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can respond with your thoughts on any of those platforms or as a voicemail on my website, belatedbinge.com. And if you want to use the website but you don't like the sound of your own voice, we also have a contact form available. And by we, I mean me. Now, let's dive into the events of this week's chapter with
Priority. Incan chapter.
We've reached the point where our wands connect. Not the tips, just the streams. So we can recap what went down in the chapter that we just read. This week, Dobby's Warning starts with paying off the cliffhanger from the first chapter where Harry was going to go lay in bed and pretend he didn't exist, but there was somebody already in it. And Harry immediately knows that whatever was in the bushes staring at him right before he had to dodge the flying kitchenware. Fun fact, I had to look up kitchenware, and by look it up I mean Google it, to make sure that I wasn't just making up a word. According to the almighty Google, it is a noun that means kitchen utensils, cookware, and other items used to prepare or cook food, or throw at your nephew that you hate. Knowledge is power, people. Anyway, this weird little thing introduces itself as Dobby and starts stroking Harry's ego a lot, with lots and lots of pleasantries. And Harry's got no idea what to do in this particular situation. He spends a lot of time in these books having no idea what's going on, but how many other scenarios is he more dumbfounded than walking into his bedroom at Privet Drive with the Dursleys and finding a house elf in his bed before he even knows what a house elf is? There can't be many. This has got to be top 5, top 10, top 7. I don't know how. That's a magic number. I don't know. Anyways, he's, in his mind, he's stupid and doesn't know what to do. Maybe in yours too. I don't know. Of course, he learns that this thing's name is Dobby, and it is, in fact, a house elf, and the awkward conversation ensues. We're not going to go line by line, but the highlights are basically as follows. Harry is trying to be polite the entire time, but also figure out what the hell Dobby's doing there, and why the hell Dobby is on this night. This night of all nights. Why? Why in the world are you here, Dobby? Dobby keeps freaking out and losing his shit every 5 seconds, wailing or beating himself in the head with something, or against the wall or the window. Just, it's not great. Not great. A lot of self-harm happening for that little elf. Harry tries to keep him quiet and not get himself beaten in the head by the Dursleys. Dobby gives us a little bit of an explanation of what the house elf's role is in the wizarding world, which is slavery. Nothing too heavy for children's books. The whole thing's leading to Dobby trying to keep Harry from going back to Hogwarts this year, because there's a plot to make terrible things happen at Hogwarts. Okay, so we're going to stop there. For starters, Dobby says some really interesting stuff here. One, he says that Voldemort's not behind this plot, but he is. So, without going full-on spoiler for the whole plot of the book already in Chapter 2, granted, this is a spoiler-full podcast, but what's the point in talking about the entire book? Right now, we have lots of chapters to get through. Is Dobby aware that this is ultimately a Voldemort plan? Does he perhaps think that it's just a Lucius Malfoy, cooked up scheme by himself in his own evil brilliance? Please let the idea of Lucius being a genius or brilliant at anything, just let it marinate. No, Lucius still sucks. Does he know the details of the plan, or did he just overhear that Lucius was going to put a plan in place to get rid of the Muggleborns? And, what would that motivation have been? Just blatant racism? Was it all about trying to get Dumbledore ousted from Hogwarts? Both? My last question, and this is a fairly important one, is what the hell does this have to do with Harry Potter? I'm trying to figure out the math between plan that Lucius had and why Dobby thought it absolutely imperative that he keep Harry Potter out of Hogwarts. If you have an answer to that, please let me know, because I don't get it. But regardless of my lack of understanding of the why, the how he was going to keep Harry away was apparently by intercepting every owl that was bringing Harry a letter, because if Harry thought he had no friends at school, he would just drop out of school, maybe take the wizarding equivalent of a GED test, maybe take that hacky magic course that we learn about from Filch coming up later in the book. I don't know, that seems logical. Another question, so apparently that wasn't my last one. Dobby is an enslaved house elf who's defying his masters by coming to see Harry Potter in this particular chapter. He's had to sneak away from Malfoy Manor undetected in order to do this, and he'll undoubtedly have to punish himself for it. And as problematic as all of that and that entire concept is, which is definitely another episode in and of itself, right now, I want to know how often he's doing this. If he has to intercept every owl, is he there every day? Otherwise, how does he know when Harry's getting an owl? Yeah, here we go. Sure. Magic, sure. But then if he's gone every day monitoring for Harry's incoming owls, how have the Malfoys not noticed he's missing all the time? I'm clearly overthinking this. We can just say the answer's obviously plot and move on, but I don't know. To me, 2 and 2 doesn't equal fish in this particular instance. But at this point, we're back in the chapter, and now he's playing keep away with Harry's letters, and since Harry's incapable of simply lying and saying he won't go to school, we're gonna go running down the hall, and all hell's about to break loose. Dobby magics the fancy pudding in the kitchen onto the floor, and the Dursleys freak out, calling Harry their disturbed nephew, and this doesn't exactly kill the deal with the Masons. But then, here comes an owl. And apparently, Mrs. Mason, the wife of the bigwig that Vernon's trying to kiss up to, is deathly afraid of birds. And they think the Dursleys came up with the owl to just have a good old laugh. Again, why the hell would that be what Mr. Mason thought? Whatever. Now, for some reason, Vernon, who won't let Hedwig leave her cage to ensure Harry never got a letter, forces Harry to read his letter. It seems highly out of character, but for once in this clusterfuck of a chapter, I think I know why this time. This has got to be coming from the Letters from No One chapter in the first book, when Vernon tried to not read the letter that Harry got and tried to keep the letters from Harry. And it literally took over his entire life and home, drove him batshit crazy, and led to his son getting a pigtail. So he's afraid of all that happening again, right? So he just wants Harry to read the letter so that he can promptly murder him when he's finished. Eat your heart out, Voldemort. This is how it's done. Anyways, the letter gives a warning about using magic outside of school. Vernon turns into an absolute lunatic, locking his nephew in his room with bars on the windows and a cat flap to feed him through, letting him shit twice a day. He's in solitary suburban confinement, Muggle style, which is definitely the name of the first single on this book's Wizard Rock album, which is something I should probably write and start producing, because we're stacking up on the names and ideas. We're incredibly low on the actual song output at this point, but keep me honest. This will happen at some point, maybe, sort of, possibly. If you literally make sure that I do it, I might actually do it. Anyways, even though he's eating cold canned soup, he still cares enough to save a little bit in the bottom of the bowl for Hedwig. Everybody say "aww" at the same time. Harry has the best character. Is he the best character? Maybe not. Highly underrated in this fandom, in my opinion, but he's not the best character. But the character he does possess is damn near flawless. Get that distinction right. Follow me down the yellow brick road here. He falls asleep. He has a weird dream about Dobby banging on the bars of his window like he's a snake at the zoo. Yeah, callback. And stirs awake to see Ron Weasley staring back at him through the bars. And that wraps up a short, brief, and absolutely bonkers mess of a chapter, bringing us to